As of this year, the Megami Tensei franchise would have been around for 34 years, and it's still going strong, with Persona 5 topping many lists of best PS4 games, including my own, and SMT5 hopefully receiving some news this year. However, a lot of the series still remains fairly unknown and obscure, not least because half of it has never been released outside of Japan. So I'm here today to look at the DNA of Persona and trace it back to its original Megami Tensei roots. Because the Megami Tensei franchise is so vast, I'm splitting it into 11 separate sub-series, or branches. Megami Tensei, Shin Megami Tensei, Last Bible, Mugen Tensei, Devil Summoner, Jack Series, Persona, Devil Children, Digital Devil Saga, Devil Survivor, and Other. I very much doubt I'm the first person to do this sort of video, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into the story and lore, but rather give a general overview of all the various games, anime, manga, light novels, weird mobile spin-offs, audio dramas, and how they all fit together. As a note, there will be some spoilers here, but mostly for things that have never been released in English and likely never will. This is where the first branch is introduced, the Megami Tensei branch. Entries in this branch all roughly form one continuity. It's set in modern day Japan, which is a staple for the franchise going forward, and it gets its name, Megami Tensei, from the heroine, Yumiko, being the reincarnation of the goddess Izanami, while the protagonist, Nakajima, is the reincarnation of the god Izanagi. Those of you who've played Persona 4 will probably be at least a little bit familiar with the mythology behind these two, but since this isn't a video on Japanese mythology, I won't go into detail on that this time around. The earliest entry into the Megami Tensei franchise wasn't even a game. The series began with fantasy horror light novel, Digital Devil Story, by Aya Nishitani, released in 1986, with a sequel released later that year. These novels received a 45-minute OVA adaptation. In 1987, the first game in the series, Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei, was released, and unlike every other entry here, there was no affiliation with Atlus. Instead, this was a very, very different game. In a top-down style, similar to the classic game Gauntlet, with very little in the way of story, this game instead was developed by Telenet, with versions for the PC-88 and MSX home computer in Japan. A few months later, Atlus released their version of Digital Devil Story, Megami Tensei, in a more standard JRPG. It introduced conversing with, recruiting, and fusing of enemy demons, a feature which can be found in most other titles in the series, and a large factor in what separates the Mega 10 franchise from other JRPGs. This game takes place after the first two light novels, and the ending sees protagonist Nakajima triumphant over Lucifer's forces. However, Nishitani had other plans for his light novel continuity, and in the third and final book, Digital Devil Story 3, released in 1988, the novel ended with protagonist Nakajima going berserk and having to be mercy killed by Izanami. So, a jolly old time all round there. 2 years later on, in 1990, the first entry in the series, without any input from Nishitani, was released as Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei 2 for the NES. This was the first game in the series to feature character designs drawn by Kazuma Kaneko, who has gone on to be the demon designer for many subsequent games in the Mega 10 franchise. This functions as a direct sequel to Megami Tensei 1, set a good few years later with a different cast. Between the two games, World War III has broken out, and Megami Tensei 2 deals with the after effects of a post-apocalyptic world, which is a recurring theme in later Shin Megami Tensei games. The end of this game reveals that the demon summoning program, used throughout, was created by Nakajima from the first game, cementing the ties between the two games. The two Megami Tensei games were later bundled together for the SNES in 1995 as Kyoyaku Megami Tensei. This added the feature where choices made in the first game would come back in the second game. Meanwhile, from 1990 to 1993, Nishitani released 6 new light novels in a series entitled New Digital Devil Story, which was a branching continuity from the games. None of these games or light novels ever received an official English release, although the first 2 Digital Devil light novels received fan translations, and there are fan translations of the 2 Atlus Megami Tensei games as well. This wraps up the Digital Devil Story era. I was going to split these into 2 or 3 long videos, but while editing I realised I can get them out quicker if I split them up like this. But because of that, this means next one's going to come out sometime next week at the latest. So please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe so you don't miss out. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.